Hi, this is David McCann for WebTNG. In this video, I want to look at the WordPress media library, the copies of images that WordPress creates when you upload an image, and the settings we have for controlling this. After the overview, I'll provide some suggestions and recommendations. Let's start by taking a look in the media library. From looking around online, it seems like 1200 pixels by 600 pixels is a typical featured image size. When we look in the media library, we see one image. When we look on disk, we see that behind the scenes, WordPress has created several copies. There are settings that control the size of some of the copies that are created. I did a pretty extensive search online looking for suggestions and guidance on what settings to use here, and I didn't come up with much. I asked some site builders what settings they typically use and found that many people ignore this area. So here we have WordPress creating extra copies behind the scenes according to settings that people ignore. Well, what could go wrong? Well, there are two things. First, we might be wasting some space on the server by creating image sizes that aren't used. Second, if you're using a tool like ShortPixel for optimizing your images, and that tool is based on the number of images rendered and not the number of images uploaded, then you may be paying for image sizes to be created that you're not using. So I think there's some value in paying attention to these settings and trying to figure out what the best ones are. We have settings for three sizes. The thumbnail has this option here to crop the thumbnail to the exact dimensions. In this case, 150 pixels by 150 pixels. That's called a hard crop. If you uncheck that, and for the medium and large sizes, WordPress is going to create a proportionally sized image where the longest dimension, the longest size, is based on the setting here, and that's called a soft crop. Here we are in the WordPress editor, and I've added those image sizes to the page. When you use the editor to add an image, you get an option of which size you want to use: the thumbnail, medium, large, and the full size, which is usually the original image. Let's take a look on the front. This is the 2020 theme. We have our featured image, our thumbnail, our medium, and large. So the first thing you can see is that the thumbnail is a worthless image. We're never going to actually use it in a page. Let's take a look on disk. Here's our original image. Here's our worthless image. Here's our medium image that's 300 pixels soft cropped. Here's our large image that's 1024 image soft cropped, and here's another new image, a mystery image. Actually, this image is called a medium large image, and it's created behind the scenes by WordPress. There's not a setting in the user interface for it. The medium large size image was introduced in WordPress 4.4, and WordPress 4.4 introduced a feature called responsive images. And what that does is it modifies behind the scenes the HTML image tag. Most web browsers support this, and it gives the web browser some choice on which image to show the user based on the screen size. Let's take a look at the source code of our Hello World page. Here's the image tag for that medium-sized image. We see that it has this source set, and there are several image sizes listed. The medium size image, 300 by 150, and then that medium large image, 768 by 384, and then the large size image, 1024 by 512, and then the full size image. So the web browser is free to choose the image size that would work best based on the viewer's screen size. We are getting an extra image created, but I think this is a nice feature because it enhances the user's experience. Additional image size copies can be created also if the theme dictates it. Typically, magazine themes, for example, will call for various image sizes to accommodate the different types of layouts that they offer. Here I've installed a free popular magazine theme from the WordPress theme directory, and I've re-uploaded that same image. What we see when we look on disk is that we now have 9 copies of the image because the theme has called for additional image sizes to be created. If you're like me, you're probably suffering from information overload at about this time. But there's one more thing to take into account. WordPress 5.3, which recently came out, has introduced a feature for handling big images. Sometimes users upload images from their cell phone or from a digital camera, and they include those in their pages. They could be huge images that are many, many megabytes in size, and they don't realize that they're hurting their performance and not following best practices. So WordPress 5.3 introduced this feature for handling big images. What it did is it set a default threshold of 2,560 pixels. And if an image is uploaded that's larger than that, then WordPress will create a scaled copy of the image, which has as its longest dimensions 2,560 pixels, and that will replace the original full-sized image. I've switched to a site that's running WordPress 5.3.2, the latest version of WordPress, and I uploaded an image from my digital camera. Let's take a look at what we have on disk. So here we have our original image, we have our thumbnail, we have our medium size image, we have our medium large image, we have our large image, and then we have 3 extra sizes. WordPress has created this scaled image, which has as its longest dimension 2,560 pixels. And then it has created 2 more images. These are kind of 2x images or high-def images, high-def versions of the medium large and the large image. And WordPress uses these new sizes, these 2x images, in the source set if it makes sense. If we go into the editor and add an image, we can see we have an option for the thumbnail, the medium, the large, and the full size. However, the full size that we're able to use is this scaled image. We no longer have access in the editor to the original image because WordPress is protecting us from our own mistakes. And for many cases, this is a good thing. However, if you're a photographer, or maybe you sell full-size images and you want people to be able to see them, then you might need to add some code or a plugin to disable this big image handling feature. Here's the plugin that was created shortly after 5.3 was released to disable that big image threshold. And in the accompanying article with this video, I have the code snippet you can use in your child themes functions PHP file or in a snippets plugin to disable this as well, if it makes sense in your use case. Thanks for bearing with me as we went through the various ways that WordPress handles image sizes. Now we're to the area of the video where we're going to talk about suggestions and recommendations. What I'm going to suggest is that you set the large size image in the media settings to the size of your featured image. Previously, I said that the typical size of the featured image is 1200 by 600. But I'm going to tweak that a little bit and suggest that we use 1200 by 630. And I've increased the dimensions of the height by 30 pixels for a reason. That is because if you set your featured image to this size, then you can use the featured image for your Facebook and your Twitter social sharing image and avoid needing to create and upload additional images of very similar size. Facebook recommends that you use an image of 1200 by 630 for link shares. And Twitter, for the large size Twitter card, recommends that you upload an image that's twice as wide as it is tall. Now, 1200 by 630 isn't exactly a 2-to-1 ratio, but Twitter is forgiving enough that it will actually use this large size image. If you upload an image that is exactly the large size, WordPress won't create another large image, but will use the image you uploaded that matches that size. So again, we're minimizing the number of images being created and stored on disk and potentially being optimized with your image optimization plugin. For the thumbnail image, I suggest you check to see what size your featured image shows in the post archive. based on my recommended 1200 by 630 pixel featured image, this might be something like 450 by 225 pixels. So I would set the thumbnail image to the size of the longest side, 450 pixels. Unless your theme actually uses a square thumbnail, I'd suggest unchecking the hard crop option. And I would suggest that you set the medium size image somewhere between this 450 and 1200. Remember that WordPress is going to automatically create a medium large size, somewhere between medium and large, so I think something like 600 pixels makes sense. We'll let WordPress soft crop the thumbnail and medium-sized images. I imagine most of us use images that might be larger than any of these max heights or widths, and you can still upload those, and in your posts and pages you would choose the full-size image to use those. So you're not losing any flexibility here by using settings along these lines. Of course, if you already have a site and you have an established featured image size, then don't go with my recommendations here. Use those sizes that you're already using. Don't switch midstream. And also, if your theme has settings that it's provided that you use here, best to use those as well. I'm focusing on featured image here because that's probably the image size that we normally use over and over again. So that's why I think that makes sense and why I've chosen it. One more thing about these media settings is if you change the number to 0 in both boxes, then WordPress won't create that size. So if you really think you have no use for the image size, then you can turn it off by putting in zeros. I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't recommend it because then you take that image out of your responsive source set. But anyway, it's good to know that there's that option. Now, what about the big images? If you can be careful and not upload images greater than 2,560 pixels, then you can ignore the creation of big images. Otherwise, I suggest that you use the filter, the little PHP code snippet that I have on my website to disable that large size. I've been focusing on what we can do through the UI, the GUI settings. There are PHP filters that you can turn on and off all of the default WordPress image size options. There are also PHP filters to create your own custom sizes and to increase or decrease the big image threshold size. Should you find that you want to adjust the media settings for an existing blog, or if you change your theme and it has different media settings, there is a plugin called Regenerate Thumbnails. Regenerate Thumbnails is a free plugin in the WordPress plugin directory. You can see it has more than 1 million active installs, and it will allow you to regenerate the image sizes based on your media settings. There's also the option with the Regenerate Thumbnails plugin to remove image sizes that are no longer being used. So that's a nice feature. I'd recommend, though, that if you're going to regenerate thumbnails on your site, that you test it out first on a development or staging version of your site to make sure that the results you get are what you're expecting. And I also suggest that you do a full backup, which includes the database and the media library before starting. Finally, in conclusion, I'd like to say that my suggestions in regard to WordPress image sizes, the images created, and the options isn't the last word. This is my working conclusion that I plan to implement and test as I create new sites or update existing sites. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there's not any guidance on this topic, so I hope that we can share our experiences and what we learn in order to be able to use WordPress more effectively. If you have already gone down this path and you know of something that I've overlooked or you know a better way to go about it, please do share the logic and settings that you use in the comments below. Feel free to take a look at the full version of this post on webtng.com, as well as look at some of the other WordPress posts and videos available there. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you for watching.